Praise be to God. Praise be to God. So, Reverend Pamela.
A pleasant evening, everyone. Here beginning. The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke in the New Testament, which present similar narratives of the life and death of Jesus Christ. Since the 1780s, the first three books of the New Testament have been called the Synoptic Gospels because they are so similar in structure, content, and wording that they can easily be set side by side to provide a synoptic comparison of their content. The Gospel according to John has a different arrangement and offers a somewhat different perspective on Christ. The striking similarities between the first three Gospels prompt questions regarding the actual literary relationship that exists between them. This question, called the synoptic problem, has been elaborately studied in modern times. The New Testament. Second, later, and smaller of the two major divisions of the Christian Bible, and the portion that is canonical, authoritative only to Christianity. Christians see in the New Testament the fulfillment of the promise of the Old Testament. It relates and interprets the new covenant, represented in the life and death of Jesus between God and the followers of Christ, the promised Messiah. Like the Old Testament, it contains a variety of writings. Among its 27 books are selected recollections of the life and acts and sayings of Jesus in the four Gospels, a historical narrative of the first years of the Christian church in the Acts of the Apostles. The epistles are letters of advice, instruction, admonition, and exhortation to local groups of Christians. 14 attributed to St. Paul, 1 Hebrews, probably in error, and 7 by 3 other authors, and an apocalyptic description of the intervention of God in history, the book of Revelation. The books are not arranged chronologically in the New Testament. The epistles of Paul, for example, which addresses the immediate problems of local churches shortly after Christ's death, are considered to be the earliest text. The books are instead arranged in a more logical narrative order. They are as follows. The Gospels, telling the life of Jesus and his teachings. The Acts, detailing the work of Christ's followers in propagating the Christian faith. The Epistles, teaching the meaning and implications of the faith. Revelation, prophesying future events and the culmination of the divine purpose. The setting of the New Testament within the Christian community is one factor that makes a biography of Jesus or a history of the first century church difficult or impossible. The books of the New Testament were composed not in order to satisfy historical curiosity about the events they recount, but to bear witness to a faith in the action of God through these events. A history of the New Testament is made difficult by the relatively short time span covered by these books when compared with the millennium and more of history described by the Old Testament. There is less historical information in the New Testament than in the Old, and many historical facts about the church in the first century, therefore, must be arrived at by inference from statements in one of the Gospels or that of the Epistles.
Reverend Mason, religion.
To be well, okay. Human beings' relation to that which they regard as holy, sacred, absolute spirituality, divine, or worthy of or worthy of special reverence. It is also commonly regarded as consistent of the way people deal with ultimate concern about their life and their fate after death. In many traditions, this relation and these concerns are expressed in terms of one relationship with or attitude towards God or spirits. In more humanistic or naturalistic forms of religion, they are expressed in terms of one relationship with or attitude towards the broader human community or the natural world. In many religions, texts are deemed to have scriptural status and people are esteemed to be invested with spiritually or moral authority. Believers and worship participate in and are often enjoined to perform devotional or contemplate practices such as prayers, meditation, or practical rituals. Worship and moral conduct, right belief, and participation in religious institutions are among the constituent elements of the religious life. Any of our four biblical narratives covering the life and death of Jesus Christ written according to the tradition, respectively by St. Matthew, St. Mark, St. Luke, and St. John, the four evangelists. They are placed at the beginning of the New Testament and made up about half the total text. The word gospel is derived from the Anglo-Saxon term Godspell, meaning good story, a rendering of the Latin evangelism, and the Greek evangelon means good news or good telling. Since the late 18th century, the first three have been called the Synoptic Gospel because the texts said side by side show a similar treatment of the life and death of Jesus Christ. See also Gospel according to Matthew, Gospel according to Mark, Gospel according to Luke, and Gospel according to John. The tradition of Jesus' earthly ministry and passion were remembered and then written in the Gospel accounts. They were written from the post-resurrection perspective and contain an extensive and common passion narrative. As they deal with the early ministries of Jesus from hindsight, it is also to be noted that in evangelist account, the theological presumptions and the situation of the addresses mold the formation of the four canonical gospels, which were written after the letters of St. Paul's. The primary affirmation of Christianity, of Jesus as the Christ, his message of the kingdom, and his resurrection preceded the evangelist account, and some of these affirmations were extrapolated backwards. Much as the Exodus was central in all testaments was extrapolated backwards and was the theoretical presumptions for the patriarchal narratives in Genesis. These stories were shaped by the purpose for the telling to inspire belief. The creedal beginning was expanded with material about the life and teaching of Jesus, which a reference for preoccupation with the holy figure of Jesus, demanding out of loving courtesy about curiosity about his earthly ministry and life.
All right, so Reverend Deaconess Annalise, are you ready to read it? Portion, read up to you ready to read? I'll tell you when to stop. And the dramatic, definitely take over. The gospel according to Mark.
She looking like he's stick there?
Auntie Anna.
She's stick there like she lost.
All right. Stephanie, go ahead. Gospel according to Mark.
Gospel according to Mark, to read by Deaconess Baptiste. Second of the four New Testament Gospels, narrating, recounting the life and death of Jesus, and with Matthew and Luke, one of the three Synoptic Gospels, those presenting a common view. It is attributed to Saint Mark, the evangelist, Act 12, verse 12, 15, verse 37, an associate of St. Paul and a disciple of St. Peter, whose teaching the gospel may reflect. It is the shortest and the earliest of the four gospels, presumably written during the decade preceding the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE. Most scholars agree that it was used by St. Matthew and St. Luke in composing their accounts. More than 90% of the content of Mark's Gospel appears in Matthew's and more than 50% in the Gospel of Luke. Although the text lacks literary polish, it is simple and direct, and as the earliest gospel, it is the primary source of information about the ministry of Jesus.
And just pause, just Sister Annalise, are you there? Are you able to pick up on Mark's explanation? Deaconess Annalise?
No. I hear you, Bishop. I have to explain about Mark.
No, read from Mark explanation. Just read from there. Let's read from there. Mark explanation of the Jews' custom and tradition. Translations. Sorry.
That is in what?
What he said, yeah.
But that's all right.
Yeah, she just have to-
I will
But I have to
talk.
come out. I have to come out from this, then to go back.
All right, but no problem. Continue, Zephaniah.
Yeah.
Mark's explanation of Jewish customs and his translation of Aramaic expressions suggest that he was writing for Gentile converts, probably especially for those converts living in Rome. After an introduction, the gospel describes Jesus's ministry in and around Galilee. Galilee, his journey to Jerusalem, the Passion, and the resurrection. The final passage in Mark is omitted in some manuscripts, including the two oldest and a shorter passage in substituted in others. Many scholars believe that these last verses were not written by Mark, at least not at the same time as the balance of the gospel, but were added later to account for the resurrection. Mark's gospel stresses the deeds, strength, and determination of Jesus in overcoming evil forces and defying the power of imperial rule. Mark also emphasizes the Passion, predicting it was early as chapter 8 and devoting the final third of his gospel to the last week of Jesus's life. One of the most striking elements in the gospel is Mark's characterization of Jesus as reluctant to relieve himself as the Messiah. Jesus refers to himself only as the Son of Man, and while tacitly, acknowledging St. Peter's declaration that Jesus is the Christ, he nevertheless cautions his followers not to tell anyone about him.
Nice. All right, so we have the account of Mark, and why Mark was the source used for bringing the three, where Matthew and Luke get their stories from. All right, Sister Karen, want to close off with the scriptures to be read? Scriptures.
Scriptures are also scared scriptures to reveal texts or holy written of the words, the world religions. Scriptures compress a large part of the literacy of the world, that they are very great in form, volume, age, and degree of success, but their common attribution is their words and regarding the devote of scripts, words different from original words in that they are believed either to propose or convince scriptures, spiritual and miracle power, or to be mean true, which is divine being or other sancts, sacred, realistic is relieved in the phrase and sentence of the following of full power and truth.
Nice.
Characteristic. Most sacred scriptures were originally oral and were passed down through memorization from generation to generation until they were finally committed to be written. A few still preserve oranically, such as the hymn of natural American. Many bear mistakable marks of the origin of the oral region that can be stood that recept aloud. In fact, it is still laid by many Hindus and Buddhism that the scripture lack when read silently. The meaning and significance they can have when recept aloud, for the human voice is believed to add to the reception text. The ministers of the truth and the power not related, gasped by the solidarity reader. Not all scriptures, however, were originally oral or were in all parts directly affected in religion that sought the guarant of majesty and scriptural power. The large part of recording scriptures has either a narrative of expositional character. The type of sacred and cementous texts are in fact many are viral besides miracle runnings, access Germanic alphabetical characters, and can spell primitive and active source. They include hymn, prayers, chants,
myths,
stories about God, and hero ethnic, fabulous, sacred laws direct for the conduct of rituals. The original teaching of major religious figures exposition of these teaching moral
annotated
dialogical of scene and stage physical discussion. In fact, scriptures include every form of literature captive of expression, religion, feels, or conviction. Type of sacred literature vary in
authority
authors and degrees of
of
sanctity.
sacredness.
The central import and most holy that the skanks text can in many instances be gathered into canons
Canons, yeah.
and work
Canon
of
of
faith,
faith, yeah.
which after being determined either by general agreement or by official religious bodies, becoming fixed, either limit to central works that are alone viewed as fully authorized
Yeah,
and truly belong to all future change of alters
confirmation.
the works that admits the canon of the sanctuary or
All right, semi-sacred and semi-canonical.
characters still may quiet a value of supplements text.
All right, great. All right, now this particular portion that was read, the 4 portion that was read, was taken from the as you would have seen on your thing, the website of the botanical website topic sacred scriptures. So anytime you can always go back to the website and think I will send the entire works to you on it. But something I want to go back to here is in Mark, when it was being read, the final passage in Mark Gospel, chapter 16, verses 9 to 20, it omits in some script, it is omitted in some scriptures, including the 2 oldest and the 2 shortest passages in the subtitle, and is substituted in others. The Synoptic Gospels, as you can see, all 3 revolve around Mark. Mark is the center of which Luke, 50% of Luke writing would have been taken and placed into Luke's narrative, and 90% of Matthew's writing would have been taken from Mark's narrative, and thereby that is why they are called the Synoptic Gospel, because they're basically all saying the same thing and the same events. It's just like everybody watching the screen, and everybody we seeing the screen. We know we on Zoom talking about the same thing, but we seen a different angle. But probably watching where is this bishop? You have any background? Oh, you have a Bible behind your head that is blurred or current, or it's just current glasses reflecting the lighting thing, right? So that is what you actually saying the same thing, talking about the same thing, but just from a different perspective, different. All of us stand up around a car, we talking about the car, but somebody see the right side of the car, somebody see the front of the car, some see the back of the car, some see the left side of the car. Now everybody see the same thing. It's not a 3-dimensional. They're talking in a 1-dimensional type of sentence. So this is what the Synoptic Gospel is about. So anytime we come across this and we hear about the Synoptic Gospel, we know we're talking about Matthew, Mark, Luke. Right? These 3 Gospels. It's not Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The Synoptic Gospel are the ones that are composed off of one. They're all saying the same thing. Now, they are not the harmonetics or the harmonizing of the gospel. That's a different thing to the synopticism of the gospel. The harmonism of the gospel, meaning it includes all 4 talking about the same thing. But John Gospel, John didn't take his narrative because John spoke from his experience. Remember, all these gospels were basically first in oral state. Mark didn't write it, Matthew didn't write it, Luke didn't write it. So that's why they say the gospel according to Luke or according to John. according to Matthew or according to Mark, because as Sister Karen would have read, it would have been first oral, and later down when in the first century when the church become established, then they started write. And they only started write these gospel after Paul's writing came down. So the next thing we'll be doing, we got to study the book of Paul, and it is important that we understand Paul's place in the whole narrative. Because if we don't put Paul in perspective, we want to know how Paul ended up there. We have to put it in perspective, and he has an important place, an important role to play. So it is clear that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are historical books. It is basically a continuation of the Old Testament because they're talking about Jesus before his birth, before his death.
His death.
Yeah, talk about Jesus before his death, right? And the epistles like Acts, going down to Philemon, which is 14 books of Paul, which something that we had a look at. Did Paul write the book of Hebrews? That's something like that. That different story that everybody has credited for, but we believe is what the woman name is again? Is a husband and wife team. Priscilla. Priscilla is the one who. Yeah. See, and these are things that this is why I was insisting that we understand the old before you get in. When you get in, they become a little more complex, and you realize everybody is quick to run to the new. Priscilla is one of Paul's follower. Aquila, I show we hear about Aquila and Priscilla, right? The husband and wife team that was working Paul, the tent makers, right? Did you know that? Did you know that apart from being a physician, Luke was also assisting Paul, and
Yeah.
Luke was not part of the call of the discipleship of Jesus. Right? He was no any picture. John, however, is a different story. Mark, Matthew, I better say the gospel according to Mark. So Mark was more narrative. Now there's a short passage in Mark that has been omitted. And I want to give us that. So probably I think we will run through, probably just talk about this sometime in the class, but we run through. Because not all the Bibles or the canonized Bibles. And we understand what they say when they say the canonized, right? Yes, as we discussed earlier, there were several disciples, over 150 of them. We know about 12. Yes?
Yeah.
Let's say the 12 disciples and the 12, they call that and the 13. But think about it, you got 12 and Jesus sent 70 of them out. Send them out in pairs.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that, right? So we know for sure that there were more disciples than the book is talking about. All of them would have a story to tell. But and this is where the half has not yet been told. Could have come in.
Yes.
If you were to take all the narrative from every single one of those disciples, including the women, and there's a gospel according to Mary and a gospel according to Martha, right? A gospel, Mary Magdalene, there's a gospel according to Mary Magdalene, a gospel according to Martha, there's a gospel according to Thomas. But some say they didn't have place because for some reason there was no historical relations with it. So they say, right, there we go, we'll go with this one, and we'll put it in. We'll go with that one, we'll put it in. If you will look at the German Vulgate, and I'm going from Harvard, yeah. If we're going to the German, but I don't want to sound like the guy last yesterday, but we're going to the German Vulgate. The German Vulgate Bible can't fit on your table, you know? And that have everything and still it's missing. The German Vulgate Bible me see, it is actually 4 feet in wide and width and 4 feet wide, 3 feet, 3 feet of width, and when closed, they're about a foot 18 inches high. That's page we're talking about. What they call one of the original Bibles, and they had a few of them around. So that is what we be looking at there. So this is what the Synoptic Gospel is about. When we look at the harmonizing of the Gospel, I think what Reverend Mason, you would have your Bible will have the harmonizing of the Gospel to the back of it. Most Bibles will have that to the back, where you have belong to Revelation and just turn for not that in history, historical books. I can't find mine, so I thought I had it marked out. All right, here it is. The Rise and Miracle of Jesus, the resurrection. You have it? You also have it?
No, we're looking for.
Something they call the harmonic gospel scriptures, the harmonic scriptures.
No, my Bible don't have that.
To the back of it?
No.
Yes. This one
Back of my Bible are the parables of Jesus Christ. 1 year reading plan.
All right. How many of
might have where to turn, tables and weights and measures.
All right. Most Bibles will have that, right?
Capital concurrence.
All right. So let me just run through a few from here, right? The boat of John the Baptist was foretold. You'll find that only in the book of Luke. Right? Whereas the boat of Jesus foretold, Mark, Matthew, and Luke will speak about it. Not John and Luke. I just go through Jesus' birth, again, Luke and John. Let me look for something. The ancestry of Jesus. Matthew will have talked about that. So there is one unique thing about Matthew. Matthew is the only one that went with the genealogy. And we went through the genealogy to show how Jesus was linked all the way back to David, and even going back all the way back to Ruth. Right? Jesus' baptism, again, I'm looking at the and these what I call now is will only be found in the book of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, not John. The both of Jesus, the baptism of Jesus, right? The baptism of Jesus, you wouldn't find that in John. The temptation of Jesus, you wouldn't find that in John. The binding of his ministry, you wouldn't find that in John. Again, we coming down on these what calling here the harmonical gospel, the call of the 12 disciples, only in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The 12 sent out, only in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The birth of John the Baptist, only in Matthew, Mark, Luke. Peter recognition of Jesus as the Messiah, only in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Again, Jesus predicts his death, only in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And we could go on and go on and go on. Very few where John would have been coming down to the end is where you'll find the harmonizing with Matthew and John and Luke, all four harmonizing. The agony at Gethsemane, the betrayal and arrest before Cephas the high priest, all four will speak about that. Denial of Peter, all four will speak about. Before the Jews come, so all four will speak of that. Before Pilate, all four spoke about that. Rejection by the Jews, all four speak about that. Condemned by Pilate, mocked, led away, and death and burial. So when it comes down to the the leader with the crucifixion, Jesus on the cross, his death, his burial, and his resurrection, all four would have harmonized with that. So that is the harmonic part of the gospel. But the synoptic part of the gospel, and that is why I want us to know the difference between synoptic and harmonic. The harmonic part is where all four speak about the same subject. The synoptic is where two is taken from one to only three is speaking about it, right? Matthew, Mark, and Luke. When I hear synoptic gospel, trigger Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Matthew, Mark, and Luke. When I hear harmonic, meaning all four gospel. And what the gospel is? Good news, or what? You read it, Mother Liz?
Yeah, good news or God, I don't forget that again. I want to get old.
Right? Good news or good story.
Yeah.
Nice. So that is what the gospel is about. Right? They're telling a story. They're telling something. And where story come from? They're telling something that would have happened. Some are fables. Jesus used a lot of allegories and telling stories. We know that, right? He always telling you something, but indirectly telling you. You know,
Yeah.
really, right? You understand?
You want to work it out for yourself.
Yeah, the wedding feast and go out using parables and similes to describe. And sometimes when we preaching or delivering a topic, it's good to bring that in to give the story some level of excitement, have the audience thinking about, hey, okay, all right, always, and yeah, cross references. All right, so just want us to know what was read today. It's not our original story. I didn't think it was taken and from the book, the website in Encyclopedia Britannica. I mean, no long time in them Britannica was one of the encyclopedias that ran too quick, right?
Yeah.
You know, people don't go wrong and buy that again. You know, it's online, right? Encyclopedia Britannica, scriptural topics. So you can always go into that and check it out. Any questions? I will log off here. I'll stop recording here. Render that and